Tonight's chilling tale is called The Fangs of Winter, brought to us by the brilliant mind of Brett H. July 1756. The howling of the wind barely drowned out the howling of our pursuers. Tonight was somehow colder than the last. I felt chilled to the bone and deathly exhausted, but I had to carry on, returning that which I stole, appease whom I disturbed. For the sake of my remaining companions, I had to keep pushing forward through the lacerating winds, the cruel fangs of winter. It needed to get home, or else we were all going to die. The moonlight shone pale through the vicious flurries that fell around me, but I could hardly see my own hands in front of my face. I trudged through the nearly waist-high snow, every step laborious. The one responsible sat inside my coat pocket, its presence somehow colder than the air around me. I had been tracking for the better part of the day. I ran my fingers over the cross around my neck, mouthing a silent prayer that the mountain summit was close and this ordeal would be over soon, that I would make it back to Jenny and my remaining men would make it back to their homes and families. But this frontier, this new world, bowed to gods, not of Abraham. We set out as 5, surveying and mapping out the unmarked wilderness due west. This land was the subject of dispute between the growing New York and New Hampshire. Wealthy men, business owners from both colonies had eyes for the frontier between. I couldn't tell you left from right when it came to any of that fancy business, but I was the best damn woodsman in Portsmouth. I was born and baptized as Jonah Samuelson and licensed as a land surveyor for the Crown, or, more importantly, the highest bidders in New Hampshire. My crew and I had been out for over a month, traversing forests, climbing mountains, fording rivers, making document of everything we saw on behalf of a wealthy landowner looking to expand his holdings and logging fortune. It was arduous at times with the summer sun, sometimes perilous terrain, and clouds of flies, but this land was virgin to us. The promise of unexplored territory and many, many pounds upon our return were all we needed. Our expedition went without fault until a few nights prior. It was nearing the time to return to Portsmouth. The horses were tired and the men were homesick. We all needed a wash and a shave. Family and friends were missed, and we talked among ourselves about what we would do with our cuts of the promised money. All of the answers were as different as they could get. George, one of our 2 axemen, put it plain and simple. All the ale I can drink. He was as thick as the trees, he marked, but sure could swing his axe. Henry, the youngest of the crew and the much smaller of the axemen, scoffed. You see everything this world has to offer and all you can think about is ale? George laughed. Tell me you couldn't go for a pint right now, Henry. I could, chimed in Chainman William. Aye. George grunted in agreement. Round 1 on me at the tavern when we get back. What do you say? William nodded, and Henry scoffed again. No time for that. I'm off to Cambridge. He was still a kid, wiry with the slightest wisp of a beard on his chin. It was George's turn to scoff. Gonna be a Harvard man, aren't you? He began to laugh. Henry smirked and confirmed it with a nod. The kid was shit with an axe, but smart as a whip. He'd do well at the university, a hell of a lot better than in the wilderness. Despite their staggering difference in stature and intellect, Henry and George were as close as brothers. What about you, sir? George addressed me. The corner of my lip curled into a smile. Treat Jenny a trip to the coast, most likely. In actuality, much of my cut would be lost on the card table, but I did hope to take Jenny out of Portsmouth a few nights at least. William, still got your eye on that Wentworth girl? George hooted and William turned beet red. William was my right-hand man, gruff, yet kind, hard-working, an experienced woodsman and an invaluable asset to our job. Once I have the pounds, I'm going to ask for her hand. He got out after a moment. He had been courting Catherine Wentworth, second daughter of one of the wealthiest shipping magnates in New Hampshire. Their difference in social standing made William hesitate, but he truly loved Catherine, and she loved him back. I began to clap slowly as we walked. "God bless the happy couple," I said with a grunt. George hooted again. One man stayed silent through the whole exchange. "Patrick, will you grace us with an answer?" I looked over my shoulder at our second chainman, trudging in the back with the pack horses. Head bowed and muttering, he looked up briefly without saying a word before his head returned to its bow. I guessed as much. Patrick was an odd one, devoted to the Lord to a fault, hardly speaking outside of prayer or when he was called upon for important job matters. It was an overcast afternoon, but it didn't rain, a fact I thank God for as we trekked through the wilderness. We were approaching one of the larger mountains in the area, the last unexplored landmark on our Patreon's assignment. The plan was to camp at the base for the night and go up and over the next day, surveying and recording along the way. After the mountain, we'd head due south to complete the loop, find the path we took in, and get back to civilization. 3-4 days at most until I was back at Portsmouth and a rich man. George and Henry led, nicking the trees every few feet with their axes and moving debris out of our path. Patrick and William measured as we went, and I scribbled data in the logbook. Both evening and tomorrow's mountain drew closer, and as daylight waned, we decided to set up our camp for the night. Land surveying was demanding work. Once the tents were up, we scarfed down some hard biscuits and salt beef and fell asleep within minutes. What I wouldn't give for Jenny's cooking, I thought as I drifted off. The sound of howling in the distance lulled me to sleep. The next morning was similarly overcast, the ground covered in dew. The last few days were milder, and we welcomed it after a week of damp heat and flies. I just hoped the rain would hold off. We packed our camp, ready to tackle our last obstacle before going home. The mountain's base was thickly wooded, but we found a clear path, though in large part thanks to George and Henry. One particular gnarled dead tree briefly blocked our path, but a few axe swings later we continued. The climb and our work took the better part of the day. It was afternoon when we broke the tree line. This mountain was definitely one of the taller ones in the area, and the view was spectacular. We could see for miles. Mountains, forest, water, the land that we spent the last month in. I breathed deep, taking it all in. I lived for moments like this, tranquil and beautiful, surrounded by God's creation. William and George stood near me. "View's even prettier than that Wentworth girl, eh, William?" George boomed, clapping William on the back. Henry scratched some things in a journal. Patrick stayed near the back, wordless, with a door look on his face. I approached him as we was tending the horses. "Look at this land here, Patrick." I gestured around me. "All unclaimed, virgin, beautiful. A shame those rich bastards are going to tear it up." The thoughts of trees falling, the view obstructed by roads and buildings. More and more people, specifically the wealthier ones, claiming the land, brought a tear to my eye. "But we gotta put food on the table. You never did say what you'd do with your cut." He looked at me. Patrick was about as average as you could get in appearance, with shortly cropped brown hair, a prebutial frown, and drab attire. "We are his servants. I will do as he commands," he mumbled before turning away from me. I went to church on Sundays and put my faith in God, but I was still a man, prone to indulgence. Patrick, on the other hand, believed the good food and nice clothes were unchristian, and that one hand at the card table or a pint of ale would land him squarely in fire and brimstone. I didn't like the man personally, but he kept to himself for the most part and was a hard worker. We're nearing the top. Let's keep going so we can make the descent before nightfall. I barked, taking one last look at the view. I thought we were close to the summit, but it was at least another hour before the elevation evened out. The terrain was rocky, yet smooth, with alpine shrubs dotting the path. Clouds still covered the sky, growing darker, looking like they would burst any minute. I grasped the cross around my neck and prayed the rain would hold off until I was back home in a bed with Jenny. I barely noticed the first pile of rocks. The next one caught my attention, though. A neatly stacked cluster right in my path. I glanced at it and for a second wondered its purpose, but continued forward. More and more piles appeared the closer we got to the summit. We had not encountered any tribesmen or other folk the whole expedition. George and William paid them no heed, and Henry looked at them curiously. Patrick seemed spooked, though. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," he muttered under his breath, loud enough to hear feet ahead. We eventually reached what seemed to be the summit. I wish I could say we had a better view from the summit, but the thick cloud obscured it. "Jonah, you're going to want to look at this." William's voice cut through the fog. The rock piles were everywhere up here. A few of them were knocked over as we surveyed the area, and I followed William's call. He and Henry soon came into view, standing inside what looked like a circle of the rock piles. They were looking down at something I couldn't yet discern. "Harvard man here doesn't know what it is or who made it," William said to me as I approached, giving Henry a scowl. They stood next to another pile of rocks, taller and more deliberate than the one surrounding it. Atop the pile sat a long, flat stone, and atop the stone it sat a wood carving, an idol of sorts, balanced perfectly upright. A human-like figure with the head of a wolf and ceremonial garb, about a foot high, intricately detailed and crafted out of the smoothest, deepest brown wood. I looked over at Henry, who shrugged and shook his head. "Think it could be worth anything?" I offered up. William sighed and Henry gave me a disapproving look. I reached out and picked it up, running my thumb over the wolf's head. The detail was uncanny. This had to be the work of a master woodcarver. Henry piped up. "Put it back. We shouldn't be disrespectful." The kid had a point. We were here to chart and observe the land, not raid it. But eyeing the thing? I thought a collector would shell out a higher sum than our combined expedition payout for it. I gently put the figure back on its pedestal as George and Patrick approached, the latter still muttering under his breath. I could see his usual frown give way to an expression of panic when he noticed the carving. That is not of him," he sputtered, eyes flitting from me to William to Henry. "Not blessed is this land. We are his servants. We must leave this place. We must beg for his guidance and protection." He was rambling, each word spit between rapid breaths. I grabbed him by the shoulder and shook him, looking him in the eye. "Patrick, get a hold of yourself." I gently slapped him across the face. "Everything is okay. We are at the top and will be leaving shortly. God is with us now, and he will be with us when we get to the bottom and make camp." I squeezed my cross necklace. "Calm down. We need you." His breath slowed and he maintained eye contact. I turned to the rest of the group. "Finish the measurements and let's get the hell off this mountain. We have a few hours left before it gets dark, and I sure don't want to camp up here." William, George, and Henry nodded, getting back to surveying. Patrick took his place back by the horses, wearily observing. It was short work, and in no time we were gearing up to make the descent. The clouds seemed to thicken during our time at the summit. I could barely see a foot in front of me. Nobody else could either. So no one noticed when I snuck back to the carving and slipped it into my pocket. The first drops of rain began to fall moments later. I could hear the collective groan from the group as we started our descent. We would have to be vigilant. The mountain wasn't overly steep or treacherous, but one wrong step on a damp rock could spell disaster. The want for home was stronger than ever between the sky's wet misery and the extra payday sitting in my pocket. The first hour or so of walking was uncomfortable, but harmless. The mountain silence broken by the patter of rain and grumbling of the men. Things changed halfway down the mountain, though. The droplets of rain gave way to something else. Something baffling. Something that should have been months away. It was July, and it was snowing. Not a light dusting, but a heavy snowfall that covered the ground in mere minutes. A storm worthy of December. This was bad enough, but the setting sun made it worse. We had maybe half an hour of daylight left. Not enough time to reach the mountain's base, especially with the weather. We had to set up our camp on the slope. George, Henry, chop some branches before they get too wet. Gather as much dry wood as you can. Patrick, tend to the horses. William, with me. I looked each man in the eye as I barked the orders and then made for the packs. Time was of the essence. We needed shelter and we needed it fast. The camp went up quickly. A thick canvas wedge tent, an extra skin tied between trees to deflect snow, and dry wood for a fire. We fished through the packs of dry clothes and layers, shedding our damped gear and bundling up in wool. I snuck the idol from one pocket to another. Patrick's words rang in my head. That is not of him. I was not a superstitious man, but I felt the slightest shiver as my fingers traced the wolf's snout. Wrapped in furs, we tossed and turned through the night, unable to sleep. The sounds of rustling fabrics, howling wind, and Patrick's muttering filled my ears. I lay awake, eyes open in the darkness, my fingers wrapped around my cross necklace. God, give us the sun back tomorrow and melt all this damn snow. Let us get home without further trial. I rolled over, looking for a more comfortable position, when my ears pricked at the new sound. The howl of an animal rang out, louder than the night's other noises. I sat up, alert. More howls followed, each louder than the last. They were close, and getting closer. I got to my feet and unsheathed my hunting knife. George and Henry picked up their axes. The howling continued, accompanied by growls. A whole pack from the sound of it. I could hear the horses neighing in distress, struggling against their restraints. Patrick was on his knees, muttering the Lord's Prayer. Suddenly, the howling and growling stopped, the only noise coming from the horses and the wind. I kept still, knuckles white around my knife. And then the attack began. The tent was hit from all sides, a few chunks taken out in the first salvo. Snarling fangs and claws tore through the canvas. Out of pure reflex, I turned and thrust the knife out, catching the wolf in the neck as it stuck its head through the hole of its making. I quickly pulled the knife out and rushed for the entrance, fumbling with the flap. The night had turned into a maelstrom of wind and teeth. I got the tent open and barreled out, knife in front of me. The little moonlight the storm let through revealed a sea of wolves, too many to count. Several were attacking the tent still, while others slowly crept forward, hunger and malice on their faces, and saliva dripping from their jaws. At the front of the advancing pack was the biggest wolf I'd ever seen, staring directly at me, making eye contact. It had an uncanny look to it, eyes that seemed more human than wolf, with an unnatural red glow. Behind me, George's axe thudded into one of the attackers' skulls. William appeared next to me, cavalry saber in hand. The tent was torn to hell. George emerged from a large tear, waving his axe at the wolves with one hand and helping Henry out with the other. Several dead beasts lay near the tent, courtesy of the big axe man. The wolves attacking the other sides retreated suddenly, running past us back to the larger pack. The big one stepped forward, glowing eyes still trained on me. It gave a long, spine-chilling howl, and the night exploded. The wolves rushed us, a charge like heavy lancers. One leapt and took me in the chest, nearly knocking me over before I stabbed it through the neck. George and William swung their blades like madmen. Another one came at me, open mouth going straight for my arm. I jerked away, but not before its fangs raked me, blood dripping onto the snow. I swore, stepping back and bracing for its next move. William's saber chopped down between its shoulder blades before it got the chance to strike, though. The mountain had turned into hell. Gnashing teeth, flying spittle, blood staining the fresh snow. The four of us stood side to side, backs to the tent in which Patrick continued to pray. We swung, hacked, slashed, fell the beasts in droves, yet more of them came. One managed to get its jaws around William's right leg, taking a chunk before the saber came down. The big one stood still in the mist, watching the battle unfold. It was smiling. "We have to push them back! Kill the leader!" I roared at my men, pointing at the wolf in question. I charged forward, ducking past one wolf and slashing a deep gash into another's pelt. George followed suit, Henry not far behind. William had ducked back into the tent's entrance, on one knee and holding his saber wobbly in front of him. I pushed another one off me. The alpha wasn't far now, eyes boring holes into me, and its grin dripping saliva. Henry let out a shrill scream. I turned my head to see him fall to the ground, tackled by three of the beasts. He swung his axe, to no avail, and his scream suddenly became a gargle as a wolf tore into his throat. The sight made me want to wrench, but I couldn't lose my composure. George let out a cry of anguish before flying into a rage, butchering the animals tearing into Henry, before wildly barreling into the others like a Viking berserker. All the attention was on him, and that gave me the opening I needed. I sprang at the leader and plunged my knife into one of its red eyes. The wolf cried out, but then whirled at me, snapping at my chest. I ducked back, avoiding the fangs. It leapt and slammed into me, driving me into the ground. I could feel its hot breath as it snapped, and I pushed back, my knife still embedded in its eye. I couldn't reach it. The wolf bore down on me, its terrible jaws closer and closer to taking my face off. It put its weight on me, and I could feel something dig into my side. Both arms were in front of my face to hold the monster at bay, but I needed one of my hands. Untangling one, I fished in my coat pocket as the teeth nearly brushed my nose. I felt my hand grasp the carving, and I pulled it out and drove it into the beast's face. That seemed to startle it, enough for me to surge up and rip the knife out. It howled in pain, and I took advantage of my opening. I went into a frenzy, knife going in and out, my roars mixing with its dying screams. It was all over in mere moments, and the world was once more silent. I looked up to see the other wolves motionless, fixated on their dead alpha. After a fleeting moment, they turned tail and fled, yipping and howling in fear. I slipped the carving back into my pocket, the tip of the head sticking out. Dozens of carcasses littered the ruins of our camp. George sat cradling Henry's body, surrounded by dead wolves. I approached him, resting a hand on his back. He blubbered and looked up at me. He was going... George sniffled. Harvard. He was going to be the best of us. William reemerged, using his saber as a crutch. I could see a tear roll down his face at the sight. Henry truly was shit with an axe and not meant for the wilderness. But he didn't deserve this. I could feel my eyes well up, but I wept the tears away. I was the leader of this crew. There were living men still. Men that were my responsibility. Men that I needed to get home to their families. I cleared my throat. George, I'm sorry, but he's gone. We need to get up and get off the mountain. The big man didn't move. I looked around at what was our camp. The tent was torn to shreds, large pieces of the canvas stirring about. Snow continued to fall. Blood and dead things covered by fresh layer. I swore under my breath when I noticed that the horses were gone, and with them the supplies not on our persons. We had to move and move quickly. George! He looked at me, his eyes rimmed with tears. I extended a hand. Get William up. We need to get off this mountain. I grabbed one of the longer, dry pieces of wood and cut a few pieces off the ruined tent. George was helping William to his feet, the injured man grunting in pain. Patrick finally came out of the tent, a blank expression on his face. Something in me snapped. I strode over before he could speak. My fist crunched into his face. He fell on his ass, blood streaming from his nose. I grabbed him by his shirt, pulled him up, and hit him again. William's hurt, Henry dead, and you just sat there! Another punch. Where were you? One more blow before George's big hands pulled me off the downed man. Patrick lay on his back, his face a red mess. He rose to his feet and spit a glob of blood into the snow. He protected me, he said in a monotone voice. I wanted to hit him again, but George held me back. Patrick's eyes looked me up and down, and a smirk crossed his face. I snarled at him. What makes you more worthy of him than Henry, huh? His gaze landed on my coat pocket, and his expression turned stony. You damned yourself, Jonah. You damned us with your pride and sins. He lunged toward me, flicking the wolf head idol from my pocket. William's eyes widened at the sight. Patrick held it aloft for all to see. This is why Henry's dead. He does not protect you, Jonah, for you strayed from him. Heathen idolatry and earthian wealth. You will not make it off this mountain. But Providence smiles upon I, the faithful, the one who walks in his light. His lips curled into a smile as he pried Henry's axe out of his lifeless hand and pointed it at me. I shrugged George off, and we both stepped back. The Lord will deliver me home, Patrick said. I am his servant, his will done through me. He placed the carving down and raised the axe over his head. I watched as he brought the axe down, the blade sinking into the wood where the wolf's head connected to the body. Crack! Patrick fell to his knees, a gaping wound open in his neck. I covered my mouth in a fleeting moment of shock. George and William were silent, dumbfounded. The gash widening and blood stained the snow, and Patrick's head fell off. His body slumped and collapsed a moment after. William choked back a sob. The idol just lay past the body. I walked over to it, not sparing Patrick's a glance, and picked it up. The wood was as shiny as ever, smooth to the touch, not even a tiny nick. I slipped it back in my pocket and turned to my two remaining men. George, get him up. We leave now. Make the base by morning, get on our path in, and we make Hangstill by evening. George opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. We get home to Portsmouth. Henry will not have died in vain. I looked over my shoulder at Patrick's headless corpse and spit. Bad luck to disrespect the dead, William muttered. Or whatever that thing is. He gestured at my pocket. Not like he respected us, I returned. Let's move. I rustled around in the ruins of the tent until I found a tinder box. Behind me, George helped William to his feet, acting as a crutch. Jonah, William called to me. I struck the flint. Nothing yet. I swore under my breath. Jonah! William repeated louder. The next strike sparked, lighting my makeshift torch. I turned to William. What? I growled. You ought to get rid of that thing. He gestured at my pocket, where the wolf head poked out. I shook my head. It's bad. Some kind of witchcraft. What it did to Patrick? And the summer snow? The wolves? Toss it aside before worse fortune befalls us. I had never seen fear like this on William's face in years of working together. For a second, I considered it. No, I calmly replied. It comes to Portsmouth, with us. William's expression dropped further. We'll fetch a hefty price for it, and you have my word that we will split the pounds between the three of us. Henry and Patrick are dead, Jonah. We might not even make it back to Portsmouth. He protested. Our maps are gone, William. Our supplies are gone. All records of this expedition are gone. All these months in the wilderness with nothing to show? I could feel the burning anger rising up again. Either this comes with us, I pulled the idol out of my pocket, or we return empty-handed and destitute. Think, William. You may be richer than the Wentworths when we unload this. He glared daggers at me. What happened to you? The Jonah Samuelson I knew would never forsake his crew no matter the purse. George nodded in agreement. We go now. This discussion is over, I said, steel in my voice. William spit on the ground and continued to glare at me. I turned and began walking, holding the torch high. George nudged William and followed, holding the injured man up. The snow had not stopped since midday, a fact we soon realized while walking. It covered the ground and swallowed our every step, nearly knee-high. We marched through the night, not a word spoken. I could feel William stare on me as I led, heard his pained grunts as George helped him along. We were damped, cold, exhausted, and miserable. The thoughts of Portsmouth, of Jenny, of a large sack of pounds, of getting my men home, kept me moving. Our supplies were few. We picked the camp clean before departing, taking all that we could carry, but still slim pickings. The wolves weren't done with us either. They kept their distance, but tailed us through the night. Effortlessly gliding over the snow, I could hear the howls creeping ever closer, see the occasional glint of eyes when I peeked over my shoulder. They wanted us dead. After all, we killed their alpha and a good number of their pack, and, I summarized, had something they wanted. I didn't think they would attack us again, simply pursue, and wait until we drop of exhaustion, hunger, or the cold. I could feel the idol in my pocket as we kept on. It felt heavier than before, and cold. A cold that permeated through my layers. I looked back at my two companions. William looked like death, blank-faced and pale and clammy. George looked better, but only slightly. I held a hand up, signaling to stop. We sat down on a large log as the sky brought into the lighter's gray of dawn. I pulled a canteen out of my pack and tossed it to William. At the very least, we wouldn't die of thirst. I had been filling our water vessels with fresh snow, letting it melt. He drank long and deep, an expression of release crossing his face. All of this is my fault, I said, swallowing. William turned to face me while George continued to look at the ground with a stony expression. The big man hadn't said a word since we left camp. Sir, William started, but I held a hand up. You're my crew, and my responsibility. I failed Henry. I failed Patrick. I tried my best to hold my composure. But I will not fail you. I reached into my pocket, grabbed the carving, and tossed it into the woods. It landed head first, the wolf's head sinking into the snow. Take some time to recover your strength, then we move. Reach Hinsdale before nightfall, find a doctor for William, hot meals and real beds. I looked to George, maybe even a pint of ale. His eyes didn't move from the ground. We sat bundled for about half an hour. Our log was luckily under dense tree cover that shielded us from the worst of the snow, but it was still cold. Neither of my companions said a word. Just past my water canteen and the little hardtack we salvaged back and forth. Color had begun to return to William's face, and I could feel a surge of hope that we would make it out of the wilderness after all. That hope was dashed by a grim realization when we got up. I didn't notice it when we sat down, but I saw it now. There was an axe mark on the log. I frantically began brushing snow off to confirm my suspicion as I observed the area. What's wrong? William asked, sensing my distress. This place, I sputtered out. We went through here yesterday, this tree here. I pointed at the log. George marked it. The snow masks it, but this is that big dead tree that blocked us when we began the climb yesterday. I pounded my fist on the log, letting out a cry, my mind racing, and I felt the cold, worse than before. George was expressionless, continuing to stare at the ground. William hobbled over, placing a hand on my back. You said it yourself, Jonah. We have to keep moving. Circle the base, he said, trying to hide a quiver in his voice. I took a deep breath. He was right. We had to keep moving. I got back up, composure returning. William was my second for a reason. He was smart and good at keeping me in check. We go due south until we find the marker, then turn eastward. Do not go up or down the slope. I addressed them with a quiet rasp. George wordlessly slung William's arm over him, and we started our trek once more. I did not look back at the idol, still half buried in the snow behind us. During our rest, the snow had risen further, nearly thigh-high. We silently marched, one foot in front of the other, one step at a time. The snow showed no signs of letting up. I could hardly tell where we were in the white wasteland. But all the same, I pushed forward. George and William did the same, the latter groaning with every step. An hour passed, then two, and then my eyes took in something I could not believe. The fallen tree lay in front of us, the carving a few feet away, barely sticking out of the rising snow. Somehow, we were back where we left off. William let out a cry of despair. It won't let us leave, he said, choking back another cry. He fell to his knees with a look of weariness, utter defeat. George stared at the ground, void of emotion. It took me all of the grit in the world not to scream, not to stomp across the snow and pummel the figure until my fist bled, or take George's axe to it. I already lost my composure once. I had to be strong for William and George, my crewmen. The Jonah Samuelson I knew would never forsake his crew no matter the purse. I steeled myself, preparing to give my final orders. William, George, you have done me a great service, honored me joining my expeditions. You are both good men. I trudged my way over to the idol and fished it out of the snow. I told you I would not fail you. I stuffed it in my coat pocket and turned to face them. Stay here until morning, and find what you can to build shelter and fire. I will try to return by morning, but If I am not here by dawn's first light, go. William, you make the call. William's eyes brimmed with tears. I'm sorry, gentlemen. I should have listened to you at the summit. Left well enough alone. I leave you now to return this. I pray that I have the fortune to return to Portsmouth with you. But if I'm not at this point coming morning, make haste. God bless you, and may he be with us all. I turned away before either man could say a word. The climb was going to be arduous and perilous, the snow making it that much more difficult. The path was at least clear, trees with Henry and George's axe marks showing me the way. I quickly found that snow and incline made for a miserable combination. Every 20 or so minutes saw me keeling over out of breath, or looking for a place to sit, but all the same, I had to make it to the summit. The day went by, and soon the light was fading. With the darkness came a cold more bitter than the previous nights, and the faraway sound of howling. Would they continue to pursue me, or go for my men? Did William and George shelter themselves? I pushed the thoughts from my head and continued forward. Soon enough, I was past the tree line. The beautiful views from our previous ascent were obscured by the darkness and snow, and the path was less obvious. Forward was the only direction that mattered. Every laborious step I took would get me closer to the summit, closer to returning the carving. I wonder if anything would even change upon its return, but I had to try for the sake of my men. My foot caught on something beneath the snow, and I fell face down into it. The freezing cold racked my body with a pain I had never experienced. I felt sluggish, my energy seeping out into the snow. The idol felt heavy in my pocket. Thoughts, vivid images, swam through my head. George on a stool at the Portsmouth Tavern, 2 pints of ale in front of him, one to drink and one to pour out for poor Henry. William laying on a sick bed, leg wrapped in bandages. Catherine Wentworth sitting beside him holding his hand. And Jenny, sweet Jenny, greeting me with a kiss and a hot pot of her famous chicken soup as I opened the door to my home. I tried to get off the ground, grunting and pushing. For a second, I thought I had found my balance, but my legs gave out, and I was once again face down in the snow. I could feel my heart start to slow, despite the freezing wind cutting into me. A warmth passed over me like a soothing balm. The snow no longer felt like 1,000 needles prickling my flesh, but a cloud-like cushion. My thoughts, as well as my vision, became muddled. Yet, there was still a noticeable voice in the back of my head, a reminder of my men and my Jenny. I tried to rise once more to no avail. All I wanted to do was sleep. The last thing I heard before oblivion took me was the sound of howling, far away and triumphant.